Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Your hosts, Austin Render, Dalton Shetler, back together here on episode 45. Dalton and I both battling the same illness in the same 2 weeks here has been a ton of fun. Good to see you back on the show here, buddy. How are you?
You know what? Feeling a little bit better. The meals are staying in me, so that's a win. It's been a really rocky road, but we're both on the up and up, right?
I don't know how you called NCAA tournament games because I've had the virus since we got back, and I don't know how you did that, man. You must have been high as a kite on some of these medications, I would imagine.
That's exactly correct. But yeah, no, it's I dug deep, gave it all I had, but yeah, no, we both have the same bug, but I ended up losing 15 or 18 pounds from this illness that had me miss last week, and it's
Yeah, I haven't had that, but we're back together. Voices are mostly intact at this point, and we got a lot to talk about.
If anybody out there is looking for a weight loss plan, apparently I'm your guy too. So just let me know.
I personally would not recommend that weight loss plan, but Dalton may have different opinions. Hey, we're available on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Check out all our episodes live there. Approximately noon Eastern. Sometimes health concerns or things delay us, but we're always live on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. You can catch us after the fact there. All our videos are archived on that site. We're also available on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Dalton, it's hard to believe this will be the last episode that we preview an actual basketball game, because the next time we talk, the season will officially be over for all 18 teams. 17 of them have already moved on to the transfer portal at this point. But we still have one team remaining. That's UCLA Bruins. So I think we should start there. They get a 76-62 win over Ole Miss. Lauren Betts was sensational in this game. 15 of 16 from the floor, a 30-plus point double-double. And this one was never really in doubt. UCLA kind of dominated it, but the one we should talk about is their Elite Eight win over LSU. This was a revenge spot, as women's basketball bracketologists seem to do, and they just love to put these revenge games in the bracket. You just think about all the rematches from last year. We had this one. We had UConn, USC, Indiana, South Carolina. A lot of rematches from last year's tournament. And UCLA does get the revenge they were looking for with this 72-65 win. This was not about Lauren Betts. She had 17 and 7, but to me, this one was about the three-point shooting of the supporting cast. Jaquez and Gardner were tremendous in this game. They knocked down threes when they needed them. And if UCLA is going to hit threes around the play of Lauren Betts, I don't know about you, Dalton, but this is my favorite to win the national title right now.
I completely agree. And I felt like in our analysis of this season of UCLA, it started where we were wildly impressed with the Bruins, right? Because we saw Lauren Betts at her very best. We saw this team on the outside shooting around. You said, how do you beat them? And then they went through, I don't even want to call it a slump. They suffered 2 losses to USC in the span of a few weeks to close the regular season. They had a close call against Iowa, but we thought maybe they weren't playing their best. Maybe they had peaked early, but it feels like during this NCAA tournament to me, Austin, and I'm sure you as well, Lauren Betts has gotten back to the dominant Lauren Betts. And in this game against LSU that we're talking about, LSU decided to try and take her away. And again, like you said, if UCLA is going to hit shots from the outside where Gardner and Jaquez go a combined 9 of 13 from 3, I think they're cutting the nets down in Tampa at the end of this. They are that good, and I think they've gotten back to playing what is an iteration of their best version of basketball.
Yeah, I said this last week on the show that I think those 2 losses to USC almost, in my mind, almost put them second. And I was thinking, okay, well, USC's got the best chance to win. And you almost, again, it's the same thing we did with USC through the regular season, where it was like we kind of forgot about them because we were focusing on UCLA. Then USC grabbed the spotlight with those 2 wins, and we kind of forgot about UCLA. And obviously the Juju Watkins injury took away some of the potential for a fourth matchup there between those two. But UCLA, UConn could be, Dalton, the game of the tournament. I think there's a lot of potential. I think South Carolina, Texas is going to be a rock fight. It's going to be first to 50, 55 points. But I think UCLA, UConn has a real chance to be like the game of this tournament. It's going to be prime time, final game of the night. And I mean, I don't think we could ask for much of a better Final Four matchup than this one. You've got Paige Beckers maybe playing the best basketball of her career. You've got this UCLA team that we've talked about all season where if you have Lauren Betts inside and you surround her with shooters, how do you defend that?
Yep.
And UConn is not a huge team. Sarah Strong was really good against Erie Fenn last night, but can she go against Lauren Betts and that size? Will they have to dig in and help off of some of the shooters? Like you said, if Gardner and Hawkes are going to hit threes, 9 of 13 the other night, they're going to be impossible to beat. But as an opponent, Dalton, it almost feels like that's the way you have to go. You have to say, we're going to make life really difficult on Lauren Betts, hope she turns the ball over, and hope they miss some threes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think there's certain ways you can curtail that, right? Like you can help off of not Jaquez and Gardner. I think you have to find ways defensively where you help and you take your chances with other shooters. I think that's the best kind of game plan you could possibly drum up against UCLA. And it's also easier said than done. But if UCLA is going to play that efficiently, like we keep talking about, I mean, UCLA could absolutely win this. And from the other perspective, Austin, the way I look at this matchup with UConn is UConn, it's not so much about those defensive answers. Like I think you can curtail, like I said, maybe certain ways to defend, but this is about the perimeter shooting of UConn, and that's where their strength is the perimeter, right? Between Beckers and Fudd. Like I just want to see if Beckers and UConn can keep up with UCLA. I think that's the real game plan. If they hit shots and stay right in that one, that's kind of how I see it playing out. And I think Paige Beckers and this UConn backcourt is the kind of group that is ready for the challenge. So to your point, I think this can end up being the game of the tournament. What is the game of the tournament so far? Is it Maryland Bama? Is that the best we
Probably.
have?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this could potentially, I mean, not go multiple overtimes and maybe as high scoring, but this could certainly be, as given the stage relative as well, the game of the tournament. And I'm really excited for it.
I would assume we're going to get some Beckers on Kiki Rice
Mm-hmm.
matchups, which will be very intriguing. AZ Fudd was quiet last night in their win over USC. I don't expect that to continue.
Yep.
But UCLA, again, for all the credit we give their offense, their defense has been really good this year. Yep. So how do they stack up with the shooting of UConn? Because like you said, they're a perimeter-oriented team. Sarah Strong was unbelievable last night, though, especially in that first quarter. So this is a matchup. And shout out to UCLA. First ever Final Four for the Bruins program. Shout out to our guy, Dave Marcus, who wanted to be on the show today, but he's traveling. It's a travel day, which we need to get into that in a second. But
yeah.
Just an awesome story for what Corey Close has done for this program. It's been building and building and building, and here they are in their first ever Final Four.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad we took a moment just to celebrate the fact that they made a Final Four. It's hard to make a Final Four, yes, especially in today's landscape. So for Corey Close, UCLA to do that, really special stuff. Dave, bring it home for the Big Ten.
Yeah,
you have the entire Big Ten rooting for you. But I did want to circle back to the point, too. You talked about the Bruins defense. Lauren Betts in that last game, that win over LSU, had 6 blocks. So she's not that she ever lost a step, but still playing at a high level on that end of the floor. It'll be really interesting if she deters those UConn guards away from coming to the rim. If it's just about them hitting some shots on the outside, and if Kiki Rice and those guards are able to lock some of that up, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm really excited.
It's going to be great. It's going to be such a great matchup, and I think it might be a little palate cleansing after what I don't think is going to be the prettiest of basketball between South Carolina and Texas. I shouldn't say prettiest. It's two different styles. If you like the defense, you're going to like that first game. I think if you want offense, you're going to like the second game. It is interesting, though, Dalton, that we should discuss it. Not that you and I are the powers that be in women's basketball, but a lot of talk this week about the scheduling. Gino Auriemma has had his takes on it. I think Vic Schaefer has waded into those waters as well. obviously they play a day after the men throughout the first 2 weekends of the tournament. So the tournament starts Friday through Monday, second round's Friday through Monday. But then in the Final Four, they jump ahead of the men. So it goes from Monday to now Friday and then Sunday championship game, whereas the men finish on Sunday. They don't play till Saturday. So all these teams can go home. They can have practices at their home gyms. Some of these guys, I'm not going to say they don't skip class, but the guys actually get to go to class.
Yep.
And on the women's side, you're probably, if you played last night in Spokane, is UConn even going home? Like, assume they're just flying straight to Tampa.
Right.
And so it is interesting. I don't know what the solution is, because you don't want to go up against men's and play them both on Saturday. The men are not going to switch you and go on Friday and the women go on Saturday. So I don't know what the solution is, but it is interesting that coaches are starting to talk about it, especially guys like Vic Schaefer and Gino Auriemma, who have a lot of weight in this sport, are starting to bring this up as like, hey, we just played in Spokane on a Monday night, and now we're flying across the country to Tampa and we're playing in 3 days. Like, there's something to it. I just don't know what the solution is.
No, I'm with you. And I think you laid it out great too, because there are benefits to this, right? I mean, the fact that the championship game happens on Sunday by itself, we just saw historic ratings in the last year now, given partially the Caitlin Clark effect, right? Like that's a big part of the reason why, but you have a standalone opportunity with the TV, and that's why this is kind of formatted this way. It just feels like you should be able to have still standalone opportunities and find a way to do this where there's not 3 days in between playing your Elite Eight game and the Final Four game. And given how early you have to make it to Tampa, the Final Four site, for the media responsibilities, the press conferences, everything else ahead of time, like there's a lot that you wedge in to those 3 days besides practices, scouting, and anything else. There's a lot of the other hoopla that you kind of have to deal with. So I'm kind of surprised that coaches haven't talked more about this in the past. Maybe they haven't. I've just missed it, because it does seem like a real concern that I would be certainly concerned with as a coach. But
well, I think
Go ahead.
the 2 regional site as opposed to 4 has made this a little bit more difficult, because it is requiring a little bit more travel now. I don't know if that's maybe playing a role in it. I don't know.
But regardless, like it overall, just to go from Monday to Friday, just point blank period, it's too tight. It just feels like there's got to be a different solution out there where you can still have some of the benefits of having those standalones, right? Where you're not competing against the men's tournament, because that's great. The Final Four should be staggered, where we're watching women's basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's basketball. It just feels like there's got to be a better way to be able to get to this point. That's where I would land.
I think you could, it's not like there's, because this is it. This is your last 3 games of the year, 2 Final Fours and a national title. Could you, in theory, start it on Sunday and go Sunday, Tuesday, and you're still uninterrupted at that point, and you're still alternating women's basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball? Like, I think
that's a better setup than what we currently have. I would be down for that.
Yeah, because then you would go men's Final Four on Saturday, women's Final Four on Sunday, men's championship on Monday, women's championship on Tuesday. Now, are you dying to finish your season on a Tuesday as opposed to that Sunday afternoon window that I think probably gets the most viewers on TV? You probably want to stay on that Sunday block. And again, so much of our sport, so much of sport in general is around TV contracts and TV windows. So if Sunday afternoon is the ideal spot for TV viewership, then that's probably what we're going to stick with. But for the purposes of trying to find a solution, it feels like Sunday to Tuesday would make a lot more sense.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, look, so much about college basketball is celebrating the Final Four. College basketball is so unique in that aspect, right? Where it's not so much the national champion that we consistently celebrate and And we do. I'm trying to necessarily frame it as there isn't another sport where we celebrate the semifinals, making the semifinals of the
Yeah.
league
Yeah.
like we do in college basketball. So if Sunday is your ideal standalone time, right? You put those two semifinal games together. I mean, that's still a win. And that would be a ratings win. People tune in for the Final Four. We celebrate the Final Four unlike anything else in any other sport for semifinal matchups. So I think you'd be okay with taking high ratings on that Sunday. And then, I mean, you're probably going to get a pretty good matchup on Tuesday, and people will still find ways to tune in on a weeknight. I like that setup better than what we currently have.
They should put us in charge of these things. We're coming up with good solutions here. I would imagine when somebody like Gino Auriemma brings it up, there's probably conversations going on.
Yeah.
When somebody of that stature in this game is the one kind of parading for it, that feels like a pretty good catalyst to get something going. Let's talk other tournament teams. The run has come to an end for USC. Obviously, we talked about it last week on the show. You were not here, Dalton, but obviously the Juju Watkins injury just totally changed the ceiling of USC. And they fought back in this game against UConn. They had it to a 5-point game heading into the fourth quarter. But you just felt like this UConn team's playing its best basketball of the year. And USC was shorthanded. And I think all that came together in the fourth quarter. But give USC credit. They beat a very good Kansas State team without Juju Watkins. They got great performances from their freshmen, from Rhea Marshall in game 2 against UConn. She was tremendous with a double-double. But I think you didn't have the firepower that you've built your entire season around. And it would be unfair to criticize USC for anything post the Juju Watkins injury.
Austin, I think you nailed that right on the head. I think that's exactly how I felt watching it. I applauded when the end of the third quarter, the Trojans went on a run to cut it to that 5 before they got to the fourth quarter, but I never really felt that USC was going to win that game. It's a lot to overcome when you lose somebody like Juju Watkins. And you're right, I was fighting for my life with this illness that we talked about at the top, but missed last week. But the Juju Watkins injury, when it happened, my heart just sank. And I'm sure you've covered this in pretty good detail, the feelings of it. But I really felt in that moment too, especially in a year this year where both men and women, I feel like there's a decent lack of storylines to chase through this March Madness compared to many in the past. I don't remember a March Madness that was this maybe empty of storylines. And sure, there are certain storylines. I'm not saying they don't exist, period. Everybody's curious on the women's side. Can South Carolina repeat? Can UCLA get their first ever championship? There's certainly storylines. But especially, this is a thing that I've noticed on the men's side, Austin, is there aren't as many stars anymore that we kind of follow in March Madness, right? Because it used to be, even if there wasn't the players that have been around for 4 years that you followed, there was Coach K, there was Williams, there was Jay Wright, and there were Jim Boeheim. There's stories around those. There's certainly still some of those on the men's side, but the women have actually been able to gain some leverage in March Madness by having players stick around because of the WNBA draft rules. I mean, Juju Watkins be back next year. There's stars that are created over time that you kind of follow and watch. And I thought the Juju Watkins injury, unfortunately, tossed a wet blanket over March Madness altogether for me. And look, I'm still tuning in for the Final Four. I'm still going to watch. I'm still watching the championship games. But that was my feeling at that time. I was like, this is one of the best stories we have in college basketball, period, men's or women's. And it just got cut at the knees. And it was horribly unfortunate, besides just being heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. It selfishly ruined an awesome matchup between Juju Watkins and Paige Beckers for a spot in the Final Four. And as basketball fans, we all wanted to see that. And I also felt like USC, because we've seen it, has the best makeup of a team to beat UCLA.
Yep.
It's the reason I didn't pick UCLA to win it all, was because I thought USC would beat them again because they are the best matchup for them.
Yep.
Now, when Juju Watkins goes down, you're no longer the best matchup against almost anybody because that's 25 points a game from a generational superstar that you're now losing. So that it's the same reason I had I known this, and obviously everyone would have picked their bracket differently. I
Right.
think UCLA is the best matchup to beat South Carolina. We've obviously seen it this year, but South Carolina doesn't have the post play they've had in the past years,
Yep.
and Lauren Betts will expose that. Whereas I thought if USC, who is the best matchup to beat UCLA, were to play South Carolina would be able to win that game. It's an interesting dichotomy because like had you told me the championship's going to be UCLA South Carolina, I would have picked UCLA. But I'm picking South Carolina to win it all because I didn't think UCLA would get past USC. It's a whole thing. And so
Yeah.
now, like, it totally changed how you looked at it. Like, and obviously it would have been tough to beat UConn no matter what with the way Paige Beckers is playing right now. But it was a real bummer. And the expanded bummer of it is that now she's probably going to miss all of next year too.
Yeah.
And there's a scenario where she says, yeah, I'm good, goes to the WNBA, and we don't see Juju Watkins play another college basketball game in her career, which is a real bummer of a way to put it. But give Lindsay Gottlieb and her staff a lot of credit. They had to put together a game plan without their star pretty quickly, and they beat Kansas State. They get to the Elite Eight. Like you said, it's not – we should celebrate making the tournament. We should celebrate winning in the tournament. And for a team that's without their star, we should celebrate an Elite Eight appearance. They won 2 games without her, essentially, with Mississippi State and Kansas State. So we should
And found a way
celebrate
to push
that.
UConn. I mean, they
did.
pushed
Yeah,
UConn.
absolutely did. And they'll have a lot coming back next year. The issue is they're going to lose a lot. They're going to lose Juju Watkins with this injury. They're losing Kiki Iriafen to the WNBA, and they're going to lose Rhea Marshall to graduation. So you're going to bring back a lot of those freshmen, Kennedy Smith, Kaylee Heichel, and Avery Howell, but they're going to have to fill some pieces, probably with the portal. I think Von Oelhoffen's also gone as well, so they're going to have to put some portal pieces together. But that the bummer is that that's going to have ripple effects at USC for the next season and beyond, because they may not get Juju Watkins again. Who knows? She might come back for another year in 26, 27, but boy, that feels like it's crazy. 26, 27 is not that far away, but it feels like I'm talking like a sci-fi movie from
way into the
2005.
future.
Yeah. Maryland, heck of an effort by them. This was a game that I was working during it, so I didn't get to watch much of it, but my phone's blowing up from people like, is Maryland actually going to do this? They had the lead 60-59 with about 2 minutes left in the game, and South Carolina went on a quick 7-0 run. They got back into the lead and held on, but Brenda Freese she's not a coach you want to play in March. She's going to come up with a game plan that can beat you. And whether that, I think this was just simply South Carolina had the players to win this game, but give Maryland a lot of credit. They game planned well. They were in this game late. They had the lead late. I said this last week. I saw South Carolina with my own eyes. This is one of the most gettable South Carolina teams that Dawn Staley has had, and yet they still find ways to win. And yet I still think they're going to beat Texas on Friday night. And yet they could still win a national title. And I'll sit here and say that is a very gettable South Carolina team. Indiana had a chance to beat them. Maryland had a chance to beat them. Duke had a chance to beat them. But Dawn Staley's teams find a way to win, and they did that again here against Maryland.
Well, and I think that speaks volumes to what Dawn Staley's built over the last handful of years. Exactly what you say, because I remember last year, for Michigan State's purpose, they had to play North Carolina in the first round, and if they had beaten North Carolina, they had South Carolina waiting next. And so you kind of cheat a little bit the prep, right?
Yep.
Like as a broadcaster, you start a little bit of the work early. I remember 90% of that roster being McDonald's All-Americans. I just stared at it like, what is this?
Yeah.
You're right. This year's South Carolina team is not last year's South Carolina team, but they're still in the Final Four, still an opportunity. Indiana did push them. Obviously, you spoke a little bit about that, and I'm sure you talked about that last week. But what Maryland did, it's interesting. We talked about that UConn USC game and how never at any point, even when USC started to cut into it and flirt with it, did you think USC would win that game. Maryland was hanging around long enough where I started to think
Yeah.
Maryland was going to win that game. They really, really were impressive, and I find it so interesting. And I don't know what the real study is into this, Austin, but we saw Maryland in that Big Ten tournament game frankly not quite show up against Michigan. It wasn't Maryland that we thought. And so heading into the tournament, I was kind of curious, are the Terps on a little bit of a downstretch? Maybe it shows the conference tournament shouldn't matter that much when you're evaluating these teams. Because, I mean, the fight they showed against Alabama, that was, as we talked about earlier, maybe the game of the tournament to this point.
Yep.
And to push South Carolina this way where they had the upper hand late in the game, I thought it was incredible. And I thought, not to continue just to ditto whatever you say, but you nailed it. You don't want to play Brenda Freeze in this tournament.
No.
And South Carolina nearly learned the hard way, but Maryland continued to live up to its reputation.
I think we saw why Dawn Staley was frustrated with her draw because she had to play Terry Morin and an Indiana team that had them scouted from the year before and made them work for every ounce of that game. And then she had to play Brenda Freeze, who we know how that goes. And then she had to play a really stingy Duke team. But everybody's going to have to play tough teams in March. That's part of it. But everybody's given South Carolina their best effort. And still, Dawn Staley's Gamecocks are back in the Final Four. It's incredible. One more big picture topic. We talked about scheduling and the Final Four and all that. Terry Moore was asked in her press conference before the start of the tournament about moving the first two rounds out of hosting and into neutral sites. And she was actually open to the idea. Now, you're also asking her the first year she's on the road in 5 years. So she was probably, and she did say, she's like, I have to watch what I say because we have enjoyed hosting the last 3 years. But she did say that it is such a big advantage to host in those first two rounds. And it's a big reason why nobody higher than a 5 seed usually gets out of the first round. You don't see too many 8, 7, 6 seeds making a run. Now, obviously it happens. It happened to Indiana. It happened to Stanford. It's happened to Iowa over the past couple of years.
Ohio State.
Yep. But it is something, and I was intrigued. I thought with how good the home court advantage has been to Indiana, I didn't think Coach Morin would be so interested in the idea, but she was. And I wonder, Dalton, if that's something women's basketball will think about going to. I'm not for it. Personally, I think the hosting presents a lot of pros for the game. I think, number one, it puts a ton of butts in seats. And I think that matters a lot. I think if you go neutral site and you've got, let's just say, Oklahoma facing North Carolina in Philadelphia, like, I don't think they're attracting a huge crowd in Philly for a game between those two schools. Whereas if North Carolina is hosting Oklahoma, it's probably a packed house.
Right.
And I think that matters to the game. I think it matters to the players. I think there's something to that. And I think that's the biggest pro of it all, is that it allows you to have huge attendance numbers at these games. And it's also a reward for a great season. It's something you strive for as a top 25 team, as you are trying to get into that top 6 team to be able to host. Now, obviously, the cons is it eliminates a lot of the upsets and the Cinderella stories. Maybe more of the 5 through 9 seeds, 5 through 10 seeds are able to make a run if they're not playing on the road in the opening 2 rounds. But that's just my 2 cents on it. I was curious where you stood on the whole, if this turns into some sort of nationwide debate.
Well, my thing is, so this was my 3rd year with the women's game. The previous 6 years, I was covering the men's game at Michigan State and traveled around with them. So if there's any purists out there who get upset with what I have to say, it's fair. You can take a shot at that. But from what I've experienced in my time, Austin, the way I feel about it is kind of similar. I enjoy the on-campus games, and I could speak to experience from this year going to NC State and the Reynolds Coliseum. It seats like 5,500. Look, NC State's a lot better than Vermont, but that game, that crowd might have helped NC State to that victory, because that was a rock fight for a little bit in the fourth quarter, and that place came alive. And to your point about butts in seats, I mean, it brings a lot of people out. It brings a lot of passion out. It does reward those teams for their great seasons. But I saw this comment, and the reason why I mentioned that I had been with the men for a little bit and now with the women is because I saw this comment made by, I think, Lucy Rodine. So I don't fully steal it, who's with Middle Art Media and the Lebtard Show and that entire crew. She had mentioned that when it comes to March Madness, going to the first and second round on the men's side, not the best fan experience you can get. But you go to the first and second round on the women's side, it's fun. And it's fun because it's on those campuses, and you get to experience still the passionate fan bases, where when you go to the men's first and second round, it feels more corporate. It feels more unintimate, for a lack of better verbiage for that, but it doesn't quite have that same touch. Now, fan bases travel pretty well, and you get to the Sweet 16, Elite 8. Final Four is its own spectacle on the men's side, but I thought she nailed it. I'd been to the men's first and second rounds. It doesn't quite have the same passion engagement that you normally do. Where on the women's side, because it's on campus, you still have the passion in those buildings. And I don't know that that's something you necessarily want to get rid of. I could certainly hear the other side argument for putting this on neutral sides, getting rid of the home court advantage, because I myself would like to see more upsets and more potential Cinderellas on the women's side. But I don't know that you want to do it at the expense of what you have built in terms of environment in those opening weekends.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple things to it. And not that like you and I are both broadcasters of teams who were the quote unquote underdogs, the Cinderella potentials in our regions. And had we been on neutral sites, maybe it goes differently. I mean, Indiana was up at South Carolina, and they started making that run of the third quarter, and Colonial Life Arena was on fire. Like that, it's one of the louder places we've ever been. But if you put it on neutral site, then you kind of deal with we've heard a lot this year about, there's no upsets on the men's side. This tournament stinks. There's no Cinderellas. It creates what was an awesome Sweet 16 and Elite 8 and creates what could be a potential like fantastic best ever Final Four that they have coming up this weekend, because it's all the best teams advancing and playing each other, and it creates these incredible games. So there is something too, especially on the women's side, where like Vermont beats NC State in a neutral site. And now you've got a passionate fan base in NC State, an attractable brand that isn't playing in the Sweet 16. Or like, let's say South Carolina one year gets upset, and now you don't have Dawn Staley. And as a TV exec, you're probably wanting those types of brands in your Sweet 16, in your Elite 8s, in your Final Fours. So there's something to be said about that. However, you mentioned it feels more corporate in the neutral site. That's also something. Money plays a big role in everything we do in sports. And so I could see them going neutral site because of the corporate aspect of it. But I got to be a part of a team that hosted for 3 straight years, and it's an incredible atmosphere. And it is the reason we beat Princeton in 22. It's the reason we beat Oklahoma last year. Like, the fans carried Indiana to the finish line of both of those games, and it means a lot. And does it limit the upset? Sure. But does it increase the game of women's basketball? Yes, I think it does.
I agree.
And I think that's the big thing. As you continue to compete for viewership and to grow the game, I think it's important to capitalize on the momentum that is the hosting of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about on the Big Ten front with the NCAA tournament?
I think we're good. I think just another message to Dave. Bring it home, buddy.
Yeah, bring it home, Dave. He'll be down in Tampa broadcasting for UCLA. We should mention that there is one other Big Ten team still playing basketball right now. Minnesota advances to the WBIT championship with a 14-point win over Florida. This was on the heels of an overtime win over Gonzaga in the quarterfinals. They lost in the WNIT championship last year to St. Louis. They get another crack, this time in the WBIT championship. It's tomorrow night against Belmont at Hinkle Fieldhouse. So good luck to Justin Guard and the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who are one of two Big Ten teams still playing some basketball here into the month of April, which is certainly exciting. I know they would have loved to be in the NCAA tournament, but a second straight year of a team that, and I think that says a lot about Dawn Plitzowet and this coaching staff and what they're able to get out of their team, and the fact that they didn't just fold and want their season to end when they didn't make the NCAA tournament. She has 2 years in a row now gotten this team to play good basketball into the late weeks of March, into April, and has gotten them up for a tournament that some teams get into and don't really want to get up for. And I think that says a lot about what she and her staff have been able to do.
And again, with Braun being hurt for all but 5 games this year, I mean, we talked about it towards the end of the season. Dawn, I think, has gotten just about every ounce of this team she possibly could have and nearly put them into the big dance. It's worth celebrating. And now, to your point, I already think Dawn's done an amazing job, an A1 job in her 2 years at Minnesota to get them up for this postseason run. Pretty nice work from the Gophers again.
No doubt. All right, it is April 1st. We are not doing any April Fools on these transfer editions. Shout out to Talia Goodman on 3 Sports. I don't know how she's covering basketball and the transfer portal, but I have to like refresh Twitter every 10 minutes because I'm just ready for the next transfer portal bomb.
So, and I know you probably have discussion points that we'll probably jump into, but who's been the biggest surprise to you? Because I'll put my first nomination in, and it isn't the Big Ten. Olivia Miles from Notre Dame. That one hit me last night, and I said, what is happening?
So that's where the college game has changed, where the WNBA, she's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but might not, she's probably making more money in NIL by staying for another year in college. And that's what she's doing. She would have been a top, 3 pick? I think she was projected number 2. Yeah. And she's saying, no, hold on. I'm going to do one more year in college, and I'm going to do it somewhere else. And everybody is, I mean, you got Shams dropping the bomb on ESPN.
That was crazy.
A little Shams bomb there in the middle of the Elite Eight games last night. So I'm texting my buddies. I'm like, hey, a man can dream, right? Like maybe she'll come down south and in the same state and come play with the Hoosiers. But no, she's a huge one. I mean, personally, I did not see the Yarden Garzone transfer edition happening. That one was a surprise when I woke up and checked my phone yesterday morning, and it was blowing up with people texting me like, what's going on? To that point, to all the people who have asked me what's going on, I don't know. I'm fully into the baseball season. I'm not having conversation with the folks in the office at women's basketball, so I'm not going to weigh in on those conversations, but disappointing certainly to lose a player like that. Big Ten specific. Here are some of the big names. We knew some of these already. But just some of the big names that have been in over the last few weeks. We mentioned Garzone. We knew Sarah Williams was in the portal. That happened a couple weeks ago. We knew Gracie Merkel, Gabby Elliott in the portal from Penn State. Cody McMahon, we talked about last week on the show, a huge addition to the portal. Kaomi McMiller, with Rutgers season officially ending last week, she enters the portal. Rashunda Jones of Purdue and most of Purdue's team in the portal. Same with Wisconsin and Penn State. A lot of their teams and Indiana are in the portal. Yulia Grabovskaya from Michigan, their backup big, is in the portal. And Aaliyah Guyton from Iowa, I thought kind of the future at their point guard position is in the portal. So there's just some of the bigger names. There's a ton of people. Again, check out Talia's. She's got a tracker on the On3 website. It's free. You don't have to pay for the portal tracker. You can go check that out. We'll certainly probably have her on the pod at some point over the offseason to talk us through it. But it's busy. It's every moment there's somebody new. What's the girl from Florida State that just entered? Their best player, Layton?
I think it's Latson.
Latson. Yep. Latson. She's in the portal. So There's going to be an ever revolving door here of portal additions. That's what we'll kind of when we do, and one thing Dalton and I are going to do here over the next 2 weeks, our next two shows, April 8th and 15th, we're going to call it exit interviews for all 18 teams. We're going to look back at the season, the best moments, the low moments, the best players. We are not in those exit interviews going to try and forecast too much into the future because the portal is only going to be craziness for the next month and a half. What we will do is when we get around to July, we'll start doing those team by team previews when we bring on the other broadcasters. And that is when we will start to look at the portal and who added who, how they could impact the team. But just a heads up that we are not going to try and forecast the next season here in April because that's impossible. But when you looked at the portal and what's happened, do you have any thoughts on some of the players that have jumped in here over the last week?
Well, I think you nailed it. And of course, you're closer to the situation, even though you're in baseball season. Garzone was one that caught my attention when that name came across. Cody McMahon, I necessarily didn't stun me that she was in the portal, but nonetheless, it's one of the most talented players this conference has. That grabs your attention right away. As you were going through the list, I was just waiting to see if there was anybody I wasn't aware of because it seems to be changing minute by minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Guyton being in there certainly kind of caught my attention as well. Curious about that, but no, there's going to be so much movement, and this I don't think scratches the surface of even how many players go into the portal from the Big Ten Conference. It's the next couple of weeks is all about just buckling up and seeing what all happens, and that's just kind of today's landscape of college basketball or college sports in general. I mean, football's the same way when the season ends. All these sports are this way, but yeah, I just kind of hanging on to see happens here.
And as more teams season end in both the WBIT, the WNIT, and the NCAA tournament, we're only going to have more. We'll probably have some people from LSU have already jumped in. They ended their season on Sunday. USC and TCU both ended their seasons yesterday. You got 4 more teams ending next weekend. We're probably going to see some more in those areas of it. But it's going to be very interesting to see how all this works. One last big picture question about the portal, Dalton. If you were the czar of college sports and you could come up with a solution, because in my opinion, I think the transfer portal has gotten a little bit out of control. I have thoughts on this. I want to turn it to you first, though. If you were the czar and you could come up with whatever rule you wanted to put into place to try and hone in the transfer portal, what would be your recommendations to trying to make this thing maybe less chaotic than it already is right now?
So I would say a couple of things, and some of these might be a little too tomatoes at your screen if you don't like this. I would say a couple of things. One, the fact that it's active while games are still going is lunacy. I don't necessarily know exactly what the calendar and logistics, how we have to move this, but the portal being open while teams are trying to win the championship, it's ridiculous. And that goes both men's and women's, specifically for basketball. But the bigger thing I'd say, Austin, and it's actually funny, we recently for a different program had a conversation with John Crispin, and we were talking a little bit about the transfer portal and just kind of the state of college athletics nowadays. And he had mentioned that there needs to become, and I don't know who necessarily enforces it because it feels like the NCAA doesn't quite have authority or power or governance at all anymore on what's happening with college sports. But there has to be, we already have to a degree, and this is in my words, an informal pay for play, right? That's a thing that's happening with these NIL collectives. Like some of these are just becoming pay for play. That has to become structured. And whether it becomes structured, and this is where I understand just the buzzwords of it might lose people, but whether it becomes structured with certain contract deals, things like that for players. I mean, this is being ran as an amateur professional model, and it can't quite be that way. I think there has to be some type of players and institutions. And I think if you create those sorts of contracts or deals, that helps curtail some of this. That helps sure. And also, I think incentive in players, because right now, for a year, him or her, whatever side we're on here, men's or women's basketball, I'm thinking, but there has to be a way to incentivize. So whether it's you're signing somebody out of the portal on a something to create some sort of investment from that. And I was Czar, that's kind of what I would be looking at. That probably won't happen, at least not right away. The first question that we have to tackle, Austin, is who's enforcing or the authority on any of this? And until we figure that out, we can't even create any of these hypotheticals to make college sports better.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That right now, who's in control? Who is the legislation that is going to make this happen? Scott Van Pelt talked about it on his show. That there's no other sport where everybody is a free agent every single year. Like, that's bonkers. Imagine the NFL if after every single season, every player was available. That doesn't exist.
And with no salary cap. Like, take salary cap away too. So they're free agents and highest bidder. Go.
Yeah, which is kind of the MLB.
Yeah, true.
But they also have contract. They don't have the everybody's a free agent. They just the Yankees can pay and the Dodgers can pay however much they want. But there's a couple things. Obviously, the NIL and the money part of it, but just the transfer part of it. My solution, and this is not original. I hear this all the time. It's just something I agree with. We got to go back to pre-COVID, where you could transfer once, but if you're going to transfer a second time, you got to sit out a year.
Yeah,
that's how it's got to be. We can't have this. He or she has been at 4 schools in 4 years. Like, number one, I sound like a old man yelling at clouds, but like,
I feel that way too.
Are we teaching anybody anything by just allowing them to jump ship anytime something goes wrong? Like, I look at like a Chloe Moore McNeil in Indiana's program. Barely played her freshman year. Doesn't play a whole lot her sophomore year, but sticks with it, continues to work hard. And now she's one of the greatest players that's come through our program in its history. And that doesn't happen if the first year she doesn't play and she goes, I'm out, I'm transferring, see you later. And I just don't think we see that enough around the college game anymore, of people willing to stick it out when they don't play that first year. And part of it is when you're recruiting people, you have to promise them, hey, you're going to play. And then you get them there, and then you're like, actually, we don't have a whole lot of minutes for you right now. And then they're like, well, why did you tell me that? I'm leaving. I'm just I'm just kind of hyperbolizing here, but like, there's so many things that are issues with this. And I think we could do a whole hour-long podcast on this if we wanted to. But it's just one of those things where we can't have it where the highest bidder is going to get every biggest player in the portal, and every player can leave at the drop of a hat. Like, there's got to be something where you are in a 2-year agreement with the school you sign with. And or like the big thing that like Jay Billis and others will say is like, well, if coaches can move, then players should be able to move. There's a difference there, because look, I know like what Kevin Willard is doing is a little sleazy, and like that whole thing was frustrating. I can imagine Maryland fans are not excited about how that all went down. But there's buyouts. And there's at least like, hey, if Iowa takes Ben McCollum from Drake, they at least owe Drake money. Like, no, it's not a good situation for Drake, but at least they're being compensated in some way for it. And you can't compare player movement to coach movement, because when a player leaves Drake, their best player leaves Drake and goes to Iowa, Drake is getting nothing for that.
Right.
Nothing. Whereas if their coach is leaving and going to Iowa, they're at least getting money for that. So there needs to be contracts of some sort to where, like, if you're going to leave after a year, there's got to be a buyout involved.
Well, and so where you're finishing, Austin, that conversation where I spent most of it was on the logistics of this, right? That you
Uh-huh.
need structure, need contract. And honestly, if you built like a similar buyout type model, that would end some of this mid-major poaching that we have where the
Yep.
mid-majors just become a minor league for Division 1 Power 4 athletics. So I'm completely with you, but I wanted to circle back to the originating point that you had of the society part of this and just develop of young people. And this is where I also sound like old guy yelling at clouds. But nonetheless, I mean, this is an issue that's bigger than just college athletics. We tackled the logistics and all the other stuff, but if we are enriching and encouraging young people to run from adversity whenever it meets them instead of ever overcoming it. Like in the case of Chloe Moore McNeil, Michigan State side, Julia Arold's another good
Mhm.
example of something like this. If you consistently encourage young people to run from adversity instead of ever overcome it, I mean, this is a bigger issue than just basketball. This is a society wide issue if we continue along a path like this. And so I just think there's so many layers to it, and I thought you tackled a different layer than I did there, and I wanted to touch on it because I think you nailed it. And I really do worry about young people on that layer, on that front, with everything we have going currently.
Yeah, and I think like so many, and I'm not saying we should dogpile on the athletes, but there's just I
Right.
think sometimes when somebody leaves, all the blame goes to the program. And the blame goes to how could you not keep so and so? Like that's not always the case. Like sometimes the student athlete wants to move on and they do. And it's not necessarily like, "Oh, why didn't you offer them more money or why didn't you offer them more minutes?" Like there's so many layers to this that none of us know.
Yep.
None of us know the conversations happening in these coaches' offices after the season, but the fact that you're trying to recruit high school players, you're trying to recruit people in the portal, and you also have to recruit your entire current team at season's end. Like Tom Izzo's rant the other day was spectacular, where
Yep.
he was like, I'm not going to focus on the portal until my season is over because I don't even know who's going to be here. It's like, I haven't had those conversations. I don't know who's transferring. I don't know who's staying. The fact that he doesn't know that, like it used to be, oh, they're a sophomore. They've got 2 more years here at so and so's school. And now it's like, oh, they're a sophomore. That probably means they're leaving. Like it's just that stuff's so frustrating.
And you nailed it too. And like you said, we could go an hour, so I'll quit following up on everything. But you mentioned the coaches trying to recruit their own team, recruit the portal, recruit high school. High school's the one that's really interesting to me. I think in this whole process of how we've changed the entire landscape of everything in the last handful of years, being a high school recruit is so much different than it ever used
Yep.
to be.
Yep.
And I think really what we've done is really hurt the high school kid coming to college
Yep.
experience because so much focus now goes to portals with portal players with experience and maybe a couple of years ahead of development, where coaches are looking at high school kids and saying, "Why? I'll go get kids out of the portal."
Yeah.
And you could understand why a coach would say that in today's day and age, but nonetheless, I really feel for high school kids that come up now because I don't think they're given quite the same effort and respect or attention that they used to and should, quite frankly, get.
Yeah. And I think you see, I'm hopeful that now that the COVID years are gone, so nobody has a extra year because of COVID. Now
Yep.
you still have redshirt years, but
In
I'm
medical.
hopeful that with all these fifth year and fourth year seniors graduating this year, you're going to see some teams look at their roster and they're going to look down their bench and say, man, we should have been recruiting high school a little bit harder because
Yep.
now we just had essentially two classes of people leave. And it'll be interesting to see how that ripple affects across the country. One last thing, I know you mentioned, and I agree, like having the portal open during the tournament is bonkers. The only argument that I've heard that I would listen to is it was a coach. I can't remember who it was. Um, I don't know if it was Kelvin Sampson or what coach it was, but they were talking about like when the seasons end for every school. Oh no, it was Bruce Pearl. He said there's only 16 schools left playing by the time the Sweet 16 starts, which isn't necessarily true anymore because you've got you got on the women's side the WNIT, the WBIT. On the men's side, you've got NIT and the Crown. So there's still a lot
Brown.
of teams playing.
Yeah.
But I get his point of like, there's only 16 teams left. So you're telling everybody else whose seasons have been over maybe since March 1st that they can't do anything with their future until April 5th. So they're just sitting around waiting. And I think that also, if you say, okay, transfer portal doesn't open until after the national championship, you're going to get a lot of tampering. And you're going to get a lot of teams that seasons are over who know other teams' seasons are over, and they're going to start tampering, and it's going to become more illegal than it is right now by just opening it up. So I don't know what the solution is to that, but that's a question for another day. It's a great talking point, and we'll certainly have more opinions on it. Maybe we'll bring on some guests that have better and more researched opinions on it than us, but just something I wanted to talk about here in our show here today. Don't forget, we still have 2 teams left. UCLA is in the Final Four Friday night, second game in Tampa against UConn, and Minnesota. Good luck to them tomorrow night at Hinkle Fieldhouse against Belmont in the WBIT Finals. Dalton, thanks for joining us. Glad you're healthy and on the mend.
I'm glowing.
You are glowing. You look great today. But we'll continue to roll. As I mentioned, next Tuesday, we will start. Dalton and I are going to divide them up, 9 teams apiece. We'll do what we're going to call exit interviews for all 18 teams around the conference, kind of recap the seasons that was and give you the highs, the lows, the great moments, and then we'll head into the off season and we'll try and bring some guests on, keep the podcast fun as we go through the summer. But this is the final episode that we talk about actual basketball that's coming up. After this episode, all the basketball will be done. It's a sad time, Dalton, but thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate you hopping on.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
We'll talk to you guys next Tuesday. A reminder, we're on the Back Home Network YouTube channel and in podcast form on Apple and you're listening to us. Remember to download the episodes, give us a rating, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All that stuff helps us. We'll talk to you guys next Tuesday on the Dribble Drive.